Exceptional Radio. Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
So, I've been pondering this whole concept of let's see, what is it? Junk scientific publishing as a result of AI, and it occurred to me that scientists have been publishing their research for like the entire time that there's been a mechanism to publish and distribute ideas. And so that's like, considerable amount of time, probably, preceding the Dark Ages even. And so here we are in the information age, approaching like, I guess, the emergent age. And it only took a publicly accessible AI like 3 years to essentially, ramp up to the level of crap publishing and disinformation that humans took several hundred years to get to and couldn't even actually achieve without the information age. It's like the only thing that it's going to do for us is make things more difficult.
Oh yeah. I mean, but it's not the AI. It's like this culture. It's like, I'm not gonna blame it all on white guys.
I'm not calling.
But it's like mostly white guys that like fake it till they make it culture.
Yeah.
It's like that's what's wrong with publishing before AI, and that's what's wrong with fucking AI. It's this idea of
I don't think it's the AI from science fiction that we've all been like trained to expect to exist at some point. This is like some really bizarre.
That was always a god.
Yeah.
Like the AI in science fiction was always a god that was framed as if it was scientific, but like all of those stories are always just like
the thing
it might as well be Thor.
The thing that we're getting now is this really weird like slot machine that somehow pumps out things that are interesting, but only really interesting if you want to be entertained. If you're not willing to be entertained, then it's just like, what is
There's
this?
no real use for it.
Yeah.
There's like no actual use for it. And the problem with anybody who says that there is, it's like all of the uses that they present are still not now. They're like always in the future. And that's fine, but I think the problem is like if there's no real use for it now and it's going to take like at least $7 trillion more to get to where it has some use.
That's
like,
just
why would we do that?
But that's just to pay the developers and to pay for their hardware and their internet access. That doesn't actually cover the expansion of electrical infrastructure that's necessary to facilitate that kind of development.
I mean, I think that's included in the 7 trillion estimate.
I don't know.
Like, I'm pretty sure it is because that's where like.
I mean, they say that kind of thing, but
they say it, but my thing is like obviously. It doesn't matter because it's wrong. Like it's not like it's not the correct pathway anyway. So like all of this is worthless. But even when let's say in $7 trillion worth of investment in infrastructure and code and hardware that they get an AI that can output a movie that is the quality of Steven Spielberg. Well, we could just go to fucking Steven Spielberg.
It would cost way less than $7 trillion.
Way less. So, and this is where again
we could actually create an entire film school dedicated to teaching people how to make Spielberg style movies, and it would still cost way less than
AI
$7
should
trillion.
not be used. It shouldn't be used for qualitative anything. Like anything that's like about quality, it just shouldn't be used for.
So that's another thing. I've been looking at a lot of the big air quote AI music generation tools lately, and some of them do some really interesting things. Like some of the music I was kind of complaining about how the music generators themselves, um, sometimes produce something interesting after like an hour of fiddling with them. But some of those tools are not AI at all. Some of them are actually just like random number generators that spit out a sequence that tell a synthesizer what to do. That's not really AI. That's just a complex algorithm. It doesn't have a neural net. It's not a machine learning based system. It's just an algorithm. And I think that there's a lot of marketing generated around AI, and like there are some applications where an advanced algorithmic intelligence is very useful, but those things aren't like pretending to
name one that's not including theft. Because
I don't know what the name of the AI is that runs the fusion research, but that thing's pretty cool. The one that does the real time fine tuning one, but that's not publicly accessible. That's not even the kind. It's not. I don't even think
is that the music one?
No,
because that's why I'm talking specifically about music. Like, yeah,
no. I'm just thinking
of AI for music that doesn't involve theft.
No, that's also the problem. I'm pretty sure that like even the algorithmic ones that are just doing really simple construction, I think pretty sure those things are all trained on the Spotify library or whatever they could scrape off of the internet. Any of the free.
No, we know for sure because they came out and admitted it like last week. We know for sure now that they just went ahead and trained their music algorithms on all of the available music on the internet, legally and illegally. So we know for sure. It's not even a question now, which is why I'm like, when they did that for the music and they did that for the video, and now they basically come out and acknowledge that all of these data sets are trained illegally, but they're also running out of data, and that's not behind a paywall. It's like it's the grand irony of capitalist theft. When you run out of things to steal from, or run out of people to steal from, your engine is gone. They should have read Sun Tzu, because one of the issues is like when you're commanding an army, it's much easier to steal your resources than to create your own resources or to like grow them. Or if it's like harvest that or crops, like it's easier to steal crops than it is to grow crops. But when you're all out of crops to steal, you're going to have to figure out a way to supply your army, or else it falls apart. And that's where it's like everybody pretends to read Sun Tzu, but nobody really actually understands it if they even bother to fucking crack it open. And it's like one of those things that like everybody has on their shelf, but they just don't fucking read. Like that shit's funny to me. Because again, if anybody in these industries would have just like actually paid attention to that, they would have been investing in the creative side instead of just figuring out more creative ways to steal. And I see it in the artists, like rap. Rap isn't the only one it's happened to, and I'll point at like rock music and specifically punk rock. Punk rock, capitalism just basically swallowed it whole and spit it out as like this formula and a costume, and it tries to do that with rap and hip hop, and it succeeds to a degree. But when you get the cultural validation, you can't buy that, and that's the one thing that capitalism can never actually like fake. So there's all of these elements where you see, like, have you heard of the rapper Lotto?
Lotto?
Latto?
No.
So she changed her name to Lotto because she used to go by Mulatto, and people were like, "You can't do that in modern times. No, you can't do that." So now she goes by Lotto, and so I'm like, I'm only.
I'm sorry. I thought when you said lotto, I thought it was like lottery. Like
No, that's why I wanted to make sure that the spelling was understood. So it's not Lotto, it's Lotto. But so anyway, the only reason I'm bringing her up, I'm not trying to pick on her, but she is a reflection of the endemic problem of capitalism trying to create products out of people. And like the only reason I even heard her song is because I had to listen to the radio for like a day for the like I left the MP3 player and there's something that was fucked up with and I had to fix it. So I listened to the radio for a day and I hear this song and I'm like, okay, this isn't terrible. And I'm like listening to the words and I'm like, oh, this chick actually has bars. Like, and I'm like, I don't understand why people hate on the women rappers the way they do. And I'm listening to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And like one of the lyrics is like, I just want a one-on-one. I don't know why she's so nervous. And if you see the music video, the implication is like she's trying to call out other women rappers to be like, oh, I'm better than you. And I'm like, it's like this song is basically trying to start beef with other women rappers. And like in the video, it's not subtle. She has like pictures of like every single female rapper and like a bar over their eyes. And she's like, I just want a one-on-one. And I'm like, this is actually really cool. And then I start to think about it. I'm like, wait a minute. She wants a one-on-one. Did she write this by herself? Because if she didn't write it by herself, then asking for a one-on-one is absolute nonsense. Sure enough, she had 2 fucking other writers who are credited on the song. So it's like 3 people wrote that song. So when you're a rapper asking for a one-on-one, but you had other people write it, you're a clown. That's clown behavior. That's buffoonery. It doesn't make any fucking sense to ask for a one-on-one when you're on a team of 3. That's like saying, hey, let's play a game of basketball one-on-one, and then you come out with 3 people and the other person's like, didn't you say one-on-one? And you're like, yeah, this is one-on-one. And you just act like the other 2 people aren't fucking there. And even though it's supposed to be one-on-one, there's 3. And so this is where I'm like, I really wanted to like the song and I wanted to like what she was doing based on hearing it off the radio, where I'm like, okay, this could be a new age of rappers where I'm like, I'm not, if I'm like not feeling stuff, it may be because I'm older, but it also may be because it's trash. And so the song isn't trash, but the sentiment behind it where you're like, this is where hip hop and rap diverge, in that hip hop isn't about capitalism. Rap is about capitalism. And so you don't have to have integrity to be a rapper, but you have to have integrity to be a hip hop artist. And this is where people get confused as to like, if you look at like somebody like Drake is a rapper who's also a pop artist. He's not a hip hop artist, not even remotely. So when you have that understanding, it all makes sense. But then you have these people who want to like make it seem as if they're writing their own stuff when they're performing, in that rapping is not singing. You have to have some level of talent to sing, but you don't have to have any talent to rap. And the reason I say that is because you have rappers like fucking Blueface. You have rappers like Sugar Free. They can't rap on beat to save their fucking life, but it still counts as rap. Like, even if you just get on a beat and talk off beat, somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, that beat's hard," and ignore the fact that the rap is trash. And there's gonna be somebody that listens to it. You sing off key for an entire song,
So
unless it's like original punk rock, nobody's vibing out to that shit.
So literally yesterday, Blueface violated parole and is
that's why I called him
shipping
out,
off to 4 years in prison.
Fuck Blueface, fuck everything about him. He never should have. Like, I say his name just knowing that he's going to prison, so I'm not like, I'm not promoting him by saying his name, but fuck him. And like everything about him, and it's I feel like he's representative of these industry plants that there are men and there are women plants, and sometimes like you'll look at a person and you're like, how did this person ever get to be popular? And it's like, yeah, none of it was real. It was all artificial. And so that's where, when I was listening to the radio, I heard the only people I heard for an hour were fucking Lotto, 21 Savage, Meg Thee Stallion, and fucking Drake. That I did hear Not Like Us in that hour, but it was like only tracks from like those. They only played Not Like Us once, but the other tracks, that it was like all the same artists, where I'm like, I don't blame kids who only grow up hearing what's on the radio for like liking the stuff or not being exposed to stuff outside of it, in that you get a lot of kids going to SoundCloud and like finding independent artists. So I don't even think the kids are being swayed by industry plants that much anymore even. But the way that they still try to do it, it's just, I don't even know. It's like there's no subtlety to it. It's just like, yeah, we're gonna play the same 5 artists over and over. And if you happen to not have a MP3 player or satellite radio or something, you're shit out of luck, because you're gonna fucking go crazy hearing the same people. And it's not even, it wouldn't be that bad if it weren't for the fact that they have taken an art that was based in, the only thing that hip hop really had was its integrity. And when rap became capitalist, it like compromised that integrity in a way that if you're an outside observer, you're not going to be able to really tell the difference, which is why you still have people thinking that like Drake and Kendrick are going to do a song together at some point. It's like they think that it's some like fucking marketing gimmick. Oh. And I'm like, yeah, man, people think it's like marketing. No. And that's where I'm like, bro, rap has become so capitalist that people think this beef is like a marketing gimmick, where I don't know about you, but if somebody called me a PDF file and it was like in the public, somebody's getting like, if I was Drake and if I wasn't a PDF file, like somebody's gonna have to suffer some repercussions from getting called out on that scale. We're definitely not making a fucking song together, but at the least, somebody's like getting hurt, not necessarily like unalived or anything like that. It's not like that deep, but it's almost that deep, where if you have like integrity to protect and somebody's coming at you on a public stage like that, it's like, I feel like all bets are off when shit like that gets thrown around. But that's also why it's so fucking weird that Drake's just acting like it's no big deal. Like, to have those kinds of accusations and then to just go on and like live your life normally and then pop up on shady kick streams, like, nah, man, there's some, like, Kendrick has definitely shown a light on some weird shit that's happening. And the Mr. Beast Kai Cenat stuff is not coincidental. Like all these streamers are getting outed for like very bad behavior. And now it's almost like if somebody's famous, you basically just have to assume they're a sex pest until proven otherwise. Unfortunately. And it's like when we're at that point, I think that's part of the reason why it's like even more difficult for new artists to break through, because more than likely they're gonna be a fucking sex pest, and then something's gonna like 669 or whatever the fuck that dude's name was, Rainbow Head,
Skittle Mouth.
Like, yeah, it's like that's the standard. He's the fucking standard. The 69 god, freaky ass nigga, like, you know, that whole thing. The fact that we just have so many examples of that, I don't understand why anybody is like getting, oh, not that many people are getting famous anymore. So I understand why, but when it even happens, I still am like stunned that somebody is able to break through and be like held in that high esteem, even for a brief minute, where I'm like, I'm just gonna like stop at Keanu Reeves, and I don't know if I'm gonna become a fan of anybody new that is like not in the mainstream until they have like a 10-year fucking probationary period or some shit. And it's like I can just like rely on Keanu Reeves not to be a sex pest and to just keep being awesome. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, I'm a fan of Keanu.
The only people who have energy to keep up with that kind of pop culture awareness are college students. They're the only people who have enough time between classes, assuming they're attending class, to, you know, pay attention to that kind of thing, and that have enough social interaction to have a large enough network to be exposed to that much media. I mean, it's not like I don't have the opportunity to consume media all the time, but even then, I don't have a giant network of people that I interact with on a regular basis to be like, oh, Tien, check out this music. I think you'd really like it, because that period of my life is pretty much over, I think. And it's not that I don't want to talk to people about music. It's that I don't have the desire to be around that many people. And it's a very strange like thing to realize. Like, it's hard to be, you know, it's just hard to be exposed to ideas if you're not around different ideas. And the internet's a terrible proxy for exposing oneself to different ideas. It turns out these things are
and
finely tuned.
The quality of exposure to those ideas is going to be affected by the ratio of participants in the discussion. So that's where, or in whatever is taking place. So it's like, if you're going to a party, yeah, you may have a large quantity of interactions, but the quality of them is not going to be high. And so,
oh, sure.
I think the older you get, or the older a person gets, it's like, you know, you end up either focusing on quality or quantity. Yeah. And I feel like the people who tend to go to the parties are just really focused on the quantity. Like, maybe that is enough for them. And it's like, they don't necessarily, it may not even be caring about quality so much as they just crave the quantity. So I don't know. You know, it's like
it sucks because I really enjoy loud music, like really loud music, gigantic sound systems, and but I don't want to hang out with a giant crowd of people that are essentially necessary to facilitate that structure being assembled in some big ass field. And of course, we can reduce the size of the sound system and make it appropriate for the size of a room so it has a similar effect. But even then, that's like, I don't know anybody who has like a gymnasium and hundreds of thousands of watts of PA that they can just set up all willy-nilly.
Well, and here's
And even
something
then,
I've
do I want to
also,
listen to that kind of stuff all the time? No, not really.
but I think another issue is like when someone's enjoying something, most of the time there's this natural urge to want to like share that experience with other people, and like if not at the same time, get other people to understand like, hey, I tried this dish, or I heard this song, or I rode this roller coaster, and it was something you need to do if you're into that thing. And it's like that, it's hard to know where to draw the line with that sharing, where you're like, we might as well just have like 300 people here to all hear the bass, whereas that same sound system shared by 20 people, it may not feel like as big of a party because there aren't as many people there, but the people who get more dance floor and get to like not feel as it's easy to feel more isolated when there's a lot of people on. Ironically, I feel like in that if there's like 20 people, then you feel like you're closer to those other 20 people than like one person in a crowd of 300 who doesn't know anybody else. And so it's like, this is where I feel like the disparity between people who like crowds versus people who like smaller intimate groups. It's like, however you feel dancing by yourself in that 300 crowd is gonna largely dictate, like, are you gonna seek out that experience again? Because you if you have as big of speakers as you do at home, you might be better off at home with like 3 or 4 of your friends just playing the music at levels you can control.
Yeah.
Instead of like having to go into a different room or go outside to actually be able to have a discussion. Whereas like,
but that's the thing is, I want that Hart Plaza sound system in my backyard,
right?
And I want to be able to enjoy it with my friends and also my neighbors for like several blocks. But that's not practical. It's not impossible, just not practical. I don't actually think that I need any help finding new music. There's so much music to listen to that it's more of a, how much time am I going to give myself for this period of the day so I can go look and like find stuff to listen to.
Well, and it's funny you should say that in that manner, in that I've been thinking about the impetus to seek out new music at all, and what drives it, and like why people go back to the same songs and then take breaks. So it's like I'm starting to wonder. I mean, I don't think it's my notion, but I think there is definitely an element of self-medicating when it comes to the way people use music. But further, I don't know if it's conscious a lot of times. So like, especially if people are listening to the radio and they don't have control over what they're being like inundated with, or don't take control rather, then I feel like that self-medication can look a lot more disorganized, and it is more disorganized, and in that when there's a song playing, there is a biological reaction that, or a biophysical reaction that can't be turned off. Like you can't not feel bass if the bass is within the distance of the wave to your body. And it's like this is how like deaf people can communicate in sports, where when we played the deaf school, they would use a gigantic fucking bass drum for the football downs. And so it's like that notion of sound being something that you have, the by proxy of its existence, you are somewhat immersed, if not fully immersed, and that's something you can't get away from. And so knowing that part, it's where when people seek out concerts and they seek out loud music and loud venues where the music is going to hyper immerse them, in contrast to people who then do controlled drips, it feels like the people who do controlled drips over time develop more preference for that controlled drip rather than the like uncontrolled chaotic inundation. And I used to feel like the best way to find new music was at raves, until I figured out how to, of course not, but that's until I figured out how to like search for music. And so but this is also like at the, okay, let me put that in context. When I was a kid, you had to go into fucking Virgin Music or Blockbuster Music and listen to CDs, or you didn't even have that capacity and you had to go buy the fucking album art. And so that's not a good way to find new music compared to like going to raves and hearing it. So the rave is a far superior method of finding new music to that. But then obviously when you have access to the internet and LimeWire and fucking Napster and SoundCloud, obviously then that's much superior. But that's where you have to know, what you're missing to feel like you're not missing anything. Because that's where, again, it's like raves are loud. Raves have a lot of people. There's heavy bass, but when I can access new music, the things, and also, and I can like hang out with my friends outside, like we don't need to go to when you're in high school and you don't have like a place to go on the weekend necessarily to hang out, then the rave has another function. But we're at this place where it's like, yeah, we can have people over to our residences, or rent a venue or something just for it. And so it just, the quality of that interaction just doesn't feel like it's worth it when you know that you can do something slightly more enjoyable for our age group.
I mean, all things being what they are, I would rather spend like the thousands of dollars necessary to go to one of those Hugh Gordo Mondo world-class festivals. And I would rather spend that money and build a dub-style sound system for my backyard, a modular thing that, you have to strap together and run with some gigantic array of amplifiers that probably weigh as much as a safe, because they have lots of transformers, and just listen to it myself. I would rather spend that much money and build a giant playback system. I know that I could absolutely build a giant playback system that would satisfy, like, any bass head's like dream system for a given space. You just have to calculate how much playback system I need to build, for my garage or something, to achieve like, warehouse level of doof. I don't actually. That's the part that gets me is that I don't actually want to listen to that kind of sound system all the time. Like maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Well, there's consequences.
Yeah, like severe hearing loss can occur if you listen to expose yourself to that kind of sound pressure level for any period of time. Man, that'd be a really big investment just to listen to a speaker system like 3 times a year for a few hours at a time. Yeah, it'd still be worth it. One time upfront investment in a giant playback system can rattle my brain case at will, get over it really quickly, and just have this thing there that reminds me of just like how much low frequency I can punish myself with for a period of time. Like, yep, those were good old days. It's funny. Like, I remember seeing people at raves like hugging the subwoofer bins, just like right up on them. And I always thought like that person's not gonna have anything in like hearing in a couple of weeks. I could never, I could never get that close to like the front line if it was all subwoofers. It was always like maybe the closest I'd ever was able to get was comfortably would be like 20 yards, maybe not even that, 30 yards. I was
Yeah,
wearing
that shit is no joke.
And I was wearing
I
ear
don't,
protection. I mean, I always wore ear protection. So it was like, how can people do this? Like, I've got earplugs in. Like, I would look around, people dancing like no earplugs. Like, well, clearly they're not going to be hearing anything later.
but yeah, it's those are like the kind of people where I'm like, they're definitely trying to treat something emotionally, and it's being expressed by them like taking ecstasy and hugging a subwoofer and fucking definitely damaging their eardrums. but like, yeah, I don't know. but
That's the one thing that I really, I guess one thing. That's like the personality at concerts that I always tried to avoid. But you always run into that person because we all knew somebody who was like that at some point, and like you'd like run into them at the back of the room, and they'd be all hyped because they haven't seen anyone that they recognize like all night, and then they just yell into your ear because they have no concept of how loud they are because they can't hear anything. uh, that's part of the reason I don't really like care for concerts. Is like even even the most well-intentioned concert goer is eventually going to yell, and they're going to be like right next to your ear. And so it's like, okay, so I'm going to wear hearing protection, but then I'm not going to really be able to hear everything. And I know that there's some really fancy filters out there that allow that, again with the air quotes, allow people to hear everything at a reduced decibel. But that's like, it's not really how hearing works, but sure, whatever. So there's always a compromise. I actually really like the idea of silent rave or silent disco, except for that there's no real bass because it's just headphones, and
right.
the best headphones don't like you don't feel it like a good subwoofer. You just don't.
They have those vests.
Yeah, but that's not the same. It's really.
Have you tried them?
I've worn a rudimentary version of whatever's out there now, and it was cool. But it was like wearing. It was like those bass shaker seats like that they attach to like recliners for home theater. Sometimes they're attached to drum thrones for electronic drum kits. It was like wearing something like that, and it was it was good. It was like it had a full frequency range, but it didn't quite feel like being in front of a big group, single or multiple driver subwoofer array that was could just move that much air. And so I think that
No, see
I
that
think
I
that's
must have tried a different one because the one I tried, it like shook your whole insides.
yeah, I think
Um,
the version of it that I tried was years ago, and it was like it felt like the thing was moving, but they hadn't quite bridged the gap between um, just being like a haptic feedback device and actually having like musical vibrating capacity. It was a very different experience from what I was expecting.
okay,
That's why I say it
yeah.
was like a bass shaker that they attached to seats at a movie theater.
Yeah, the one I tried was the Subpack M2. They had it at like it was like some convention, like tech convention, where they had like 3D, like
See, that's cool.
virtual reality and fucking drones and shit like that. But the pricing, it's not like you couldn't. I don't know if anybody could just buy one for fun. But it was like it literally felt like I was in a rave. Um, where it it's it's completely different than a headphone experience,
Yeah.
like just pure headphone experience. Like with headphones, it you feel like you're in a club. It's really crazy.
Yeah, it looks
But it's
like
also
a
because it's actually like vibrating your chest.
yeah.
hmm
It's cool. It looks like a hydration pack.
And it's it's basically you're just wearing a fucking
You're
subwoofer.
wearing an amplifier.
Yeah. And it uses the bone uh like transmission, or I forget what it's called. But it like transmits more frequencies than just bass. I think it's like full range, full
Oh, that's
frequency
cool.
range.
There's
It's like better with headphones.
like a bone transducer headphone set that's used
Yeah,
for
transducer.
like in what you call it, construction, because a lot of times people be in environments where they have to actually put real hearing protection in, but they want to be able to hear over the comms.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so those things have these like points that touch the bone right behind the ear, little fingers. That stuff's actually
And they
really
have them
cool.
in sunglasses too.
Yeah, that stuff's really cool. Like really, really cool. Those things are also really weird though, because it's not a it's like analogous to hearing an acoustic guitar or hearing an acoustic electric guitar that's plugged into an amplifier. And like it's close. It still sounds good. It sounds fine, but it's just not natural. There's like something really kind of unnatural about it. Because it's not you're not hearing it through like vibrating air.
Yeah. Yeah, the Subpack M2 uses that transducer technology as well. Um, which again, that's when it's using that tech for bass, it's like a way different experience than like the bass chair. Because I was looking at those bass chairs, but it's like obviously the chair is between the woofer and your body, whereas this one going directly on your body, it's like I said, the only other experience I can compare it to is being in an actual rave.
Yeah. I the only thing that I think actually compares to a rave isn't even really fair, but it's like a well-tuned, well-designed car subwoofer system.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's like that's where bass goes
No,
into like a different place if you got a big enough system and it's tuned
I mean,
right.
I feel like it can get stronger because
That's what I mean. It goes further than
in
a rave, but it's the only place that can recreate that kind of rave balance.
well in
Um,
my car I had in high school, like the bass was so powerful that like if you would exhale smoke slowly, it vibrated the smoke like out of your body.
yeah, I,
And
I,
you could see like the smoke fucking like shaking in the air
oh
like
yeah.
as it's like coming out of your mouth where it's like
I had a system similar to that once. JP, black lesbian JP, told me to turn my stereo down because it was giving her asthma. She was like, "You got to turn that off. I'm having an asthma attack. I can't breathe." I was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" She's like, "This is why I don't listen to drum and bass." That same system made a buddy of mine. He was hungover, but it made him puke. So yeah, I no, I've definitely experienced subwoofer systems that are like too much, like overwhelming for a given space. Before I had any like sense about what I was doing, just like, yeah, I'm gonna throw the most powerful amp I can afford with the biggest magnet structure voice coil subwoofer I can find, and cross my fingers.
just dumb shit, just
Yeah,
dumb high school shit.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
I'm gonna put so much juice in this thing. I could create a lightning bolt if I wanted to. I had a buddy. He found an adapter to mount like a fire engine alternator in his Buick's engine bay and hook it up to his engine. And then he proceeded to put like 5,000 watts of power into like I think it was some like a JL W7 or W13 or whatever they are. It was a bad mamma jamma speaker system. The box took up the whole back. It was like a what is it, Park Avenue, whatever the biggest Buick from like the early 2000s or late 90s was. And it was the most block rocking thing. You couldn't even like be in the vehicle. It was incredible. And
Well,
then he proceeded to wreck the car, just driving like an idiot. Too much bass.
tends to happen.
You know, thousands of dollars of just alternator and bass machine. I mean, it sounded good when you were outside the vehicle. It was definitely like a mobile PA. It made whatever was playing in his CD player sound just fantastic about 20 feet away from the car. And so that was kind of cool. I remember riding it one time up to Indianapolis, and I think my eyes were like vibrating the whole time. That whole culture is really weird because it's like a lot of the bass machines don't even sound good. Like they don't even make music sound. They're like made tuned for one genre of music.
Well, it's like I feel like whenever they were at their peak popularity and they were the most expensive is when people were doing the shows.
Yeah,
And like the shows were, I'm sure they're still doing shows, but they're just not as popular now. So it's like we're not seeing, nobody's sharing videos of like a van with 50 subwoofers or some shit, or like the
yeah.
subwoofer competitions like they used to. And it's like I I know the fact that it's not as expensive is partially why people don't care as much, in that it's not really a flex to have subwoofers anymore. It's like anybody can get that shit
Yeah.
for like less than $1,000, and you can get a really nice system. Whereas like before, you actually had to like put some money into it, and so the fact that it cost money, I think, made people feel like even when they would be in shitty cars, like, oh, that's like a $3,000 system, $4,000 system, and it meant something back then. Because part of it too is, yeah, you don't want to actually put a crazy system in a car that costs a lot of money because it's going to shake it apart.
Yeah.
Like it, I, and the thing is, you don't
And very
notice
few
it.
people were ever like actually willing to spend the money on the dynamat and have their car disassembled
Right.
and then put
Oh,
back
fuck
together
yeah.
with new clips so that
No.
it like actually holds itself together and is like quiet and doesn't rattle itself to crap. Like
Yeah.
that's like I that was the funny thing. Like I'd seen some cars where they did that and then put like, mid-range assortment of speaker or components, didn't go hog wild on the subwoofer, and they sounded amazing. And then I've also seen the systems that were like all speakers and then no money on dampening, and they just sound like every other car with too much bass. And I think that's one of those things that's like I don't see as much anything about how to. I think it's because they have to disassemble the car basically, but like I've seen fewer guides or tutorials or way less information on how to actually install like Dynamat or any kind of damping material than there are videos about how to like for every video about damping materials in installation or like just concepts or practical advice, anything like that, there are like 10,000 vehicle specific guides, tutorials, walkthroughs, whatever you want to call it. And it's just kind of maddening because it's like there's so much focus on the easy part of it and the part that's like really only like 5% gains. Like, how can one truly appreciate these fantastic speakers and components that they're installing in their vehicle if they don't have a listening environment that is, that dampens road noise and isolates the listener to creates a more idealized, isolated listening environment in the vehicle? Like, without, if you can still hear all that road noise, that 70 decibels of tires on pavement, then that means whatever noise floor you've got, it exists above 70 decibels. I mean, 70 decibels isn't quiet.
No, not at all.
Like 30 to 40 decibels is quiet. 20 decibels is really quiet. That's probably like enough to make people get anxious. But still, like, at 70 decibels, that means that like because of the range that most music is created and the dynamic range that it exists, that means the noise floor could be as little as 4 decibels for some really quiet music, meaning you can't even hear the quietest parts of the music without proper isolation. Imagine imagine spending thousands of dollars on components and then not being able to hear the quiet parts without cranking it up so loud that you hear like the electronic self noise of the playback system itself. I think that's why like there's some environments where I just don't care. Like I don't expect to get like really serious accuracy in the truck because I know that it's a 30-year-old vehicle that just shakes and it has an inherent rumble. Like I have to have incredibly loud music going on just to get over the rumble of the tires. So I'm not too worried about it. But then there are other times where it's like if I'm sitting where I am right now and I can't hear what's going on because there's a fan in my ear, like maybe actually it means it's probably really hot outside, but maybe there's something like that's actually like not working in that environment. Maybe something outside is going on that I'm not aware of. But those are all things that I can do something about. But if the culture of listening to music is in cars has changed, then I don't know. I imagine it's really difficult to put a aftermarket stereo in one of these modern vehicles that has a giant computer screen in it. Like, how does one integrate anything new into a system that has a computer screen that controls the rest of the vehicle?
Well, what's funny is like seeing all the car commercials that I was unfortunately exposed to, like watching TV briefly. It's like all of
Oh, you
the
were
things that,
exposed. I had watched some television not too long, some actual television. It was crazy.
yeah,
I
it's
think I
so
told you about
weird.
it when I was in Texas. I watched commercial cable.
I forgot how weird television is.
Yeah.
Um, but like all they're selling on cars is like after what would have been aftermarket shit like interior lights and like screens. There's no there's no nothing about cars that they're trying to sell that actually has to do with like the function of the vehicle, but it's all like these amenities that you could put in yourself for way cheaper
Yeah.
on an older vehicle.
Well, we're in the bells and whistles phase of the car. It's just how many
Yeah,
more
for sure.
gadgets can we pack in? They've innovated the crap out of it. Motors, the gasoline engines in cars are actually really incredible in terms of like what actually comes out of them in terms of emissions. And when they have a properly, completely functioning exhaust and circulatory system, like that's part of it. They have to be well maintained, and then they do really cool stuff. Like compared to the shipping industry that's using like heavy fuel, which just pollutes like crazy. Cars are basically are you could practically like point the exhaust into your house and of like a brand new car, and it would definitely make you woozy, but it wouldn't be anything near as bad as the fog of cancer that comes out of a shipping container or a container ship.
Well, and that's another issue with um updating the uh fleet of planes and obviously cargo ships, but like they can't update fleets as fast as cars can be updated. So I think that's where at the corporate scale when they're purchasing fleets of things that are also mass transportation vehicles, I feel like we're on a like a 10 to maybe 15-year lag on when like tech that we know exists is actually visible in the fleets that we are going to be taking as like regular people. Um like I know the wealthy people are probably already exposed to the shit. Whereas like, okay, have you been to Carmel lately?
Let's see, when was the last? I'm gonna say it was within the last year.
So what in the part that you were in, did you have mostly roundabouts?
Oh, it was all roundabouts.
Yeah, they've like
there was
replaced
one
all the
long
stoplights with roundabouts.
Yeah, there was one really long curve, but it it had on and off ramps. It didn't actually have a roundabout. And then right after the off ramp section, there was a roundabout that either led like over. Oh, it was like the main drag. It was all
So
roundabouts.
that's how everything should really be designed, but it hit the rich place first. You see how it's like that sort of uh effective, efficient design where now those people aren't sitting at fucking stoplights wasting their lives.
I mean,
It looks so much better.
I've been behind like the drunk person at in the roundabout before that didn't know how to get into the roundabout.
I mean, but there's two lanes.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, if you sat behind them, that's your fault because there's two lanes. But even then, it's like the way the city looks is so much better than like fucking stoplights everywhere. And then then you see in Bloomington, it's hit in parts like the more developed parts are like that, like the newer, more developed parts, but the older parts still have fucking stoplights. And you see it slowly starting to like creep towards the middle of Bloomington, but it's like the nicer areas first. Um, there's like an area on what is it, Sayre or off like between College Mall
Oh,
and
Spicewood.
yeah. That new there's like a whole new development.
There's
Like
one near Spicewood. There's one near there's one near it's like the edge of or the corner of Hyde Park.
yep, and then there's one by that road.
There's one on Child's School. There's that road. Well, it's on
that road
it's
is
Gordon,
the name of
it's
the
Gordon,
road for the record.
No, it's
people.
Gordon Pike. That road is down the road. Two more roads.
Oh yeah, it's the easiest one to refer to.
That road. Gordon Pike is almost equidistant between that road and Lois Lane.
Great names.
I'm pretty sure
again,
that was like the hippie era of Bloomington in full effect, coming up with names like that.
Well, but you see in Bloomington where even it's like the more well-off areas have the roundabouts.
Let's see where then where else? There's some roundabouts all over the place, aren't there? Yeah, no, you're right. That's also where the new development was over time in the last 30 years.
But they didn't have to put roundabouts there. That's where and it's more so, I mean, obviously roundabouts are better than stoplights, but it's more so like there's like the lag between the rich people and the poor people, what they're using versus what we're using. And it's like, I mean, everybody who's not in the 1% is basically poor people. And I don't mean like I'm poor. Fucking, I'm definitely not part of the rich group. It's more so seeing like what is not around us and not around, like, it's like, yeah, they're I bet the planes that they take are probably slightly more carbon efficient, like not Taylor Swift because we know hers isn't.
No, you just reminded me, like, one of the roads that I drive on the most was recently repaved, and also there's been new paint that's been put down all over the roads, like, that I drive on all the time. And it's really strange because it just kind of happened, just like poof. And it's interesting to me because it's like, it's a section of road right next to a high school and another section of road that's just like, it's not a main road. None of these are like main roads. These are like the secondary corridor adjacent to the main corridor, because I don't want to deal with, multiple lanes and stoplights. I'll stop at the stop sign. I'm taking my sweet ass time. But these roads were made really nice, like within the span of a week. And this is like 5 miles of road in Bloomington that all got either repaved or new lines painted on it, and actually 2 sections that were completely repaved. And this all happened really quickly, whereas there are numerous road update projects that are happening, like, that seem to go on for months. Some of them started years ago and still seem like they haven't finished. Or maybe they just left the traffic cones and nobody's picked them up, and I need to go pick up some traffic cones.
Well, one thing I had noticed about Bloomington construction is like they'll start like 35 projects at once and only have 3 teams working.
Well, this
and
is
never
like,
work on the same project multiple days in a row. And you're like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, I don't know. We don't know either.
yeah, but that's the thing is like one of the sections that they repaved, like it's all fresh blacktop. It wasn't like treated yet. It was just in shitty condition because it was old and needed to be repaved. And I think they just went over it, just plopped down a new layer of blacktop. But I also don't know because I didn't see it happen, and I don't know it happened. It happened so quickly that it's just like, huh.
Well, I feel like you'd actually probably be able to see the old layer if they didn't take it up, and they actually just did the same thing to our street, but they like came through with some fucking crazy machine that like strips off the blacktop layer, but just the blacktop layer and leaves the layer underneath. And it like they came through and collected all that into a fucking bin, and then like 3 days later came through and repaved.
I mean, sure.
But it was like multiple days, whereas like if you didn't see it, they probably did it all in the same day.
Like they must
If it
have
was
done
like-
these two different segments on like, either two groups or the same group did it and within like back to back, because
Yeah.
like the amount of time that went between me driving on this road was actually, see, I've been to my parents' house like 6 times in the last couple of weeks, and I don't remember any like road construction. It was like must have been done like overnight or something.
Seeing how much time it took, they could easily get it done in one day. I just think it's a matter of coordinating all the machinery,
Yeah.
because like that's where I know in Detroit they definitely like have all this shit moving around. So the one that's stripping is going to be needed in different areas than necessarily the one that's paving. So if it's like they're not available on the same day in the same location, then you might have like 3 days where you're not paved until the paver is available, and that's where
See, that's
I
crazy.
think you're.
That's like, that means that like a lot of these projects are either like that they are completely started way too soon, like just prematurely. Like they don't have to do,
Yeah.
they don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
to shut down or start like diverting traffic. They can divert traffic for one day, knock it all out, and then nobody else would be like put out. But instead, some of these projects run for like, weeks or months or years. Sometimes it seems.
Yep. And again, part of it is like depending on when they start it versus what other projects are going and how much equipment is available. Like they may only, this is why it's fucking stupid. Like say your the pavement remover is only available one day, and it's like gonna be 3 weeks until the paver is available. Well, they're gonna have to go ahead and fucking remove the pavement and leave it exposed, because otherwise they're not gonna have access to the pavement remover again before it needs to be paved, or then they'd have to move the pavement back even more. So it's like, because these things are like broken up, it like does create these gaps of inattended or unattended areas that are halfway started and in a left in a state this that fucks everybody's cars up even worse, because it's like loose rocks or whatever. Like the manholes are more exposed, so now it's like when the pavement was up, the manhole would be sticking out like 3 inches, maybe like maybe even 4 inches. So it's like, and they're not like all circular, so some of them would have sharp corners. So if you were driving a car that had poor vision, or like the car is sitting too high off the ground and you can't see like right in front of your car, you could very well have ran over one of those manholes while the pavement was up and like fucked up your tire or your shock or whatever. And it's like, for the amount of damage that could happen for those when those things are exposed or when the road isn't paved, they must just not care. That it's like, if they cared, they would make sure to coordinate those things to make like so that the road was never without blacktop that was functional.
Yeah, like I always wonder about like when I see a chunk, a very clearly machine cut out section of a road next to a pedestrian walkway, a crosswalk, and there's like a sharp edge on it, and it's like, when did they do this? I wonder how long this is going to be like this. Why isn't there any kind of like, warning, like, hey, here's something that you might want to look out for. This could be a tripping hazard. These are the things that I think of when I see weird, like, started but clearly not finished construction. It's like, huh, I wonder what threshold they were using to determine whether or not there needs to be a warning sign about this. But then, like when I drive through places like that and I see people just going through like, same shit, different day, I realize that most people aren't thinking these things. They're just driving through like, yep, I'm on my way to the next page in the book of life. Gotta drive through this intersection. Oh boy, this intersection sucks. What I want to know actually is like who's in charge of programming all of the traffic lights, because I'm not saying that I want this job. What I'm saying is that what I'm trying to get at is there's got to be a person who's actually like in charge of oversight of the traffic lights for a city like Bloomington. And because we've got some traffic lights that are very clearly just punishment lights, they're not listening to any sensor input. And I see that there are sensors in the ground, but they're clearly not taking any sensor input, because if I pull up and it's like 11 o'clock at night and there's no one at this intersection except for me, and I've got a red light and this thing stays red for what feels like way too long, and 0 cars have traveled through this intersection for the entire time that I've been there, and then the next song comes on my whatever my stereo's playing in that moment, like that is an intersection that needs some attention. Because those lights are probably working on whatever default setting that they came with. But that like has to be a job that exists. That's like totally an information infrastructure administrative role that has to exist, because
you would think and you would hope, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and it feels like either somebody has programmed them to punish people, or there's nobody paying attention to it at all, because like you're saying, it doesn't use the correct signals. And they also say that flashing your lights doesn't work on them, but it absolutely does.
Yeah,
it absolutely does. Because there was like, that the term by the hospital.
Oh yeah.
Like every time I would get stuck there, I would use my fucking high beams and it would like work. And so the thing about it is like, I don't know who try. I think it's usually like the state that tries to say flashing your lights doesn't work, but it definitely does at night. The issue is it has to be at night. Otherwise, like, and even at dusk, sometimes it works.
The one that I opt for is if there's no one behind me, I'll just put it in neutral and roll back until I trip the sensor behind me. And oftentimes that's enough to do it. But then there's the part of me that's skeptical and just thinks like, yeah, well, whatever. I just waited long enough, and it was going to change anyways. And this was just something I did to fill the void or the gap in time, so I felt like something was happening. There's always.
Or your lights could have hit the fucking light sensor too, because then it would have been like a higher angle.
So yeah, exactly. There's all these like moments where I get to be a little bit skeptical, but something happened. I did something. Yeah. Something happened. It's been repeatable, so I have reason to believe that it works.
The issue
I
is
shouldn't have to do that though. When there's
no, you
nobody
shouldn't,
at
but
the
this is
intersection or the
but
coming on
getting
the
back
road.
to the original point, this is why fucking roundabouts are superior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You shouldn't be sitting waiting for nobody ever. Ever. You know what I mean? Like that, like the idea that we have to wait for these imaginary fucking cars. Oh no, your light's red. You just sit right there and wait. Somebody might come, but there's nobody on the fucking road. I can see both ways. You mean I can't go? Nope. The rule says you can't go. You have to wait. It's fucking stupid. It's so fucking stupid. And
Yeah.
I like the original reason we needed it is just because people were too stupid not to fucking hit each other. That's why we needed stoplights. It's like I've seen in India, like the way people drive and they don't hit each other, and the same shit happens in Turkey. It's like there are way more near collision incidents that don't turn into collisions because people are like more aware and they're just better at not hitting each other. Whereas in America, we need fucking lights, and then that still doesn't even work. And somehow people still manage to hit each other in those intersections. Whereas like in a roundabout, the actual worst you can do is like rear end somebody. Or at the worst you can do is like catch them when they're coming around the curve if you just don't fully stop. And even then it's not gonna be a full-on T-bone because you don't go straight into round, like the entrance into roundabouts is never like straight on. It's always like at an angle. So literally the worst you can do is like side bump somebody. You can't T-bone somebody in a fucking roundabout. It's like almost impossible.
Yeah, it'd be more like a herringbone. Hey, I got herringboned really bad at the roundabout. This doesn't sound right. There have been several times in the middle of the night coming home from Indianapolis where instead of waiting for the red light to turn into a green arrow, like I'm talking like 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, there's literally no one on the road yet because it's not 6 o'clock yet for some strange reason. And I've just driven across the road because I need to go home. And I know that that's not illegal. That's illegal. I know that's...
No, I do that shit all the time.
But at the same time, like when you're on the highway and you can see like, a mile or 2 and you can see there are no lights, like 0 lights. In fact, the only lights are the lights in the front of my vehicle. Like, what the hell am I waiting for? That's one of those things that's always like, I've always found really interesting, like, because some traffic lights on highways, not interstates, but highways, like, they're not tuned for anything at all. Like, they don't have sensors. They're on timers. Is that good as a timer? There should be a sensor, like, at the intersection points so that it knows when somebody's waiting, but not for, like, highway traffic, especially, and not to cross over. Like, that should be some common sense. Like, yeah, don't cross when there's like oncoming traffic. That's what this yield sign is supposed to indicate. But
so they did change the law for motorcycles in Indiana. So it's like if they're at a red light for excessively long, which is supposed to be like up to 2 minutes, which the idea that they know a fucking light is set for 2 minutes, then they wouldn't have made that law. So they fucking know they have these excessively long lights out there. But if you're sitting at one for more than 2 minutes and you have a motorcycle, you can turn.
So there's another reason for that is
or go across.
Motorcycles engines don't have a big enough like induction field to trigger the sensor, the radio sensor in the ground. Like even if the motorcycle is precisely positioned in the middle of the sensor, it might not be enough metal.
That's what the explanation's saying on the thread. That's funny.
Yeah, and it has to do with like resonance and the inductive properties of metal. It's a very strange like outcome because you'd think like motorcycles, that's like One of the most metal things that one can do is not metal enough to set off a metal detector. But a car, of course, is. That's just amusing to me. Imagine owning a machine that has an engine that doesn't have enough metal to set off a freaking metal detector that's in the ground. That's actually really sad. I have a 9-volt powered metal detector that can detect like tiny screws in the ground. You mean and so here we have like these giant metal detectors that can't even detect a motorcycle that are paid for by tax dollars. It seems like kind of messed up.
So it sounds like there used to be the quote air quote common knowledge that they didn't have those sensors at lights, but now enough lights have like sensors that flashing your high beams can work,
Huh.
because it's like
I'm
some of
pretty
them just straight up have cameras.
I'm pretty sure that they have to be sensitive for emergency vehicles. So like
Right,
so
right,
that makes sense.
right. They have to have some sort of frequency
Yeah, there's a frequency
that's like that
modulation.
trips it. And it's gonna have to be far enough ahead that it's not gonna be like the emergency vehicle crossing the sensor in the road,
Yeah,
the radio
it
sensor.
can't trip it and turn it green like when it's a quarter mile away and then hold it green until it gets there. It's not like that. It has to be close enough too. That'd be so fucked up.
I mean, a quarter mile wouldn't. I mean, it's like depending on it. You would think it would be automated and speed and proximity. Hopefully, they would automate it to
Yeah.
like if you have a destination, then it's gonna like make sure that the route along that is as green as possible for the timing. But that's assuming a lot.
Yeah.
That's assuming a lot more competence than I think they deserve as planners, which is also where it's like it's
Especially
easy to imagine these things because we can build them,
well,
but
I
just because
mean,
we can build them doesn't mean
we can
the
go and
government.
get one of those flipper devices and just do all sorts of crazy things if we really want to, break the law. I'm not advocating that use of that technology by any means. But I've seen plenty of videos where people are demonstrating, oh yeah, here's like the sequence to program your flipper device so that you can like have all green lights or make all the lights red, which I think is even dumber.
Mhm.
And like that's a dumb and stupid idea. Like decidedly dumb and stupid at the same time. Although there are plenty of times when I've wished that I've been able to like, turn off cellular service around me for like, within 20 feet of me. Just so it's like, so I could have a conversation with somebody without, without the threat of an impending text message derailing everything. It's also illegal to have a device that does that. So not actually going to do anything like. I guess the closest that we could do would be to set up a wireless network that doesn't actually touch the internet, so people connect to it. And they think they're going to have data, but then they don't. That's just mean.
Well, it's just the idea that states have such varied highway systems and then the cities have such varied road systems. I don't understand how people can look at this country and think, this is the best. This is it. This uneven application of resources, this is the way.
This is the best we could come up with.
Right. But it kind of makes sense in that, getting back to the previous conversation or the earlier part, I do feel like the quality versus quantity angle comes in that when you have a place like New York that is just like heavily overpopulated, it still gets like, because there's so many people, there's something positive associated with it, because if there's that many people, they must like it, even though it's overpriced. And like, not living around that many people, you can get way more for your money, but those people want to live around a lot of people, and so to them it's worth it to pay fucking $3,000 for a studio apartment that you have to share the bathroom with people on the same floor because they're around other people.
Yeah.
But to us, $3,000 for a studio apartment is like a punishment. You know?
Yeah, that's just like, what? Really?
You couldn't pay me enough to live the New York lifestyle willingly.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, obviously one has to really want that. They gotta want it so bad they can like they can taste it, that kind of thing. It's I think it's also the kind of environment where one doesn't really spend that much time at home. Unless you're wealthy. But I don't see that as an environment where one, like, I think that's the big city, so to speak, is the kind of place where one is always hustling. You've always got to keep going. You got to keep moving forward, because that place doesn't sleep. And anytime that you're not producing, you are consuming resources. That's really bleak sounding, but that's kind of how I see big metros.
Yeah, it is a lot of excessive and frivolous consumption. And, you know, I think that's part of like the way this culture is so dependent upon consumption. I think that's where it seems obvious. That's where people being overweight would come from, where you're like, well, yeah, they just consume too much. But it's like, no, it's complicated, because if you're working a job and you're hungry and you feel like you should eat, you're going to eat. Whereas like, as you get older, every time you get hungry, you can't eat. Otherwise, it like compounds into excess calories because your body doesn't need as many calories. And so shifting, like when I was 20, I would eat so many calories during a day, and then at night eat way even more calories because I needed them. Whereas now, if I tried to do that same thing on the same schedule, I would just be gaining weight because my body doesn't process calories that quickly anymore. But if I don't change my mindset and I just keep consuming because I'm a consumer, I'm gonna like consuming as a habit shouldn't be how people guide their dietary habits. And since dietary habits are so intertwined with our work, it's almost impossible to like detach those two things the more work you do over one's life. And it just becomes like, oh, I work, so I eat out. And that like I don't have time to fix my food because I work. And so the trade-off is like, yeah, I may put on a few extra calories or pounds because I'm eating more calories, but I'm doing more work. So that's the trade-off. Whereas knowing that my body isn't as efficient with calories, I can dial back my consumption. But if I was like too preoccupied with other things, I wouldn't be able to isolate that part of my consumption. Whereas like I'm still consuming the same amount of like media, like music or TV shows or movies or um audiobooks or whatever, like that type of consumption. In fact, it may have even gone up because all the time I'm not spending eating, now I can spend doing other things. So it's like on the one hand, right? On the one hand, it's like, yeah, I may not be actually consuming more food or as much food, but then that translates into the capacity to consume other things with that time. And that's where it's like, even though I'm not like basing everything in my life around consumption in terms of like that's not the metric by which I live or by which I measure my enjoyment of life. The system demands that I consume to be not dragging on it simply by proxy of existing and not consuming. And I think people get wrapped up in that impetus that the machine pushes on us, where if you're raised thinking, oh, you have to eat 3 meals a day, fucking 2,000 calories, food pyramid, and you don't take any effort to learn anything else different, then that notion of what, healthy day starts with breakfast, and it's like,
Does it really?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Do we really need to like start ingesting food as soon as we like wake up? I don't know if that's necessarily like the best way to approach things. But when one is inundated with that, that's the common knowledge. Like common knowledge is 2,000 calories a day, when in reality, everybody's basal metabolic rate is different. And so if you don't have the capacity to go out and like get it measured, and then you go off of what you've learned, then it's going to put most people in a position where they're consuming like too many calories a day, thinking that they're doing the right thing, and then not understanding why shit's not going right. But then they don't have time to check on it because they have to go to work. And so instead, they're just like, oh, maybe I'll eat a salad or something once a couple times a week, but they're still eating out. And so that salad is then still overloaded with fucking sodium and still overloaded with carbohydrates because, oh, it's not in the lettuce, it's in the fucking bacon, it's in the dressing, it's in the fucking chicken. And there's still a bunch of sugar.
There's a handful of cheese on that salad.
Yeah, and meanwhile, McDonald's is telling you, or fucking Arby's or whatever is telling you you're eating healthy because you're getting that salad and then slipping you a bunch of fucking sugar in the goddamn in the salad dressing. And so
wait, like,
I
you know,
don't
the funny thing about a salad is that it's like it's got a bunch of croutons, which are essentially extra toasted bread, and then it's got, like, you know, a whole slab of chicken that they diced up, and then there's a handful of cheese, which is probably like 3 or 4 times more cheese than you'd get on a burger. And then that, like, half a cup of dressing that is, as you pointed out, is probably as much sugar as a can of soda, plus, like, you know, a whole teaspoon
maybe
of salt.
fried chicken.
Maybe it's
sometimes.
fried chicken sometimes, so it has even more salt in it.
And these things are labeled as like healthy food.
This is a healthy alternative to a burger. Let's like add a bunch of oil and salt and sugar to your burger and trade out the burger with chicken. I don't know what's in the burger, like, but I know it's in the chicken, I think. I hope.
I can't really blame somebody who's never been given the proper impetus to get out of that cycle. Because, like, a lot of times it's only going to be a health scare that causes them to get out of that cycle, or it's gonna take something that is like a new athletic endeavor or something where, for whatever reason, they're starting to look at their health again. And the only reason I say it like that is, I don't know. I mean, I'm American, so I can't really speak on other places, but in America, the idea is like, whenever you get to be about 9 years old, that's what people assume you're going to be. So if you're fat, if you're skinny, then people are going to, like, treat you that way until you're different, but treat you as if that is you, and that size defines something significant about your identity. And when people get stuck in those frameworks in their minds, a lot of that can lead to eating disorder and body dysmorphia, but not necessarily extreme manifestations. And so everybody's body dysmorphia or eating disorder doesn't look like anorexia or bulimia. Sometimes it just looks like fucking somebody who goes to McDonald's and only gets salads, or somebody who goes to, like, Fridays and only gets salads. Like, it may not look like a eating disorder, but that is an eating disorder. It's just a mild one. And so when people get in these, like, mild eating disorders or mild body dysmorphia cases that aren't bad enough for them to seek therapy, and also not bad enough for, like, other people to, like, intervene, then they can get stuck in these modes for their entire lives. And it's like, there may not be anything that pushes them out of that mode of approaching food. And it's unfortunate because, on the one hand, like, people should be able to enjoy food without eating and feeling like this is going to be like the meal that makes them fat. But on the other hand, every meal shouldn't be a hedonistic exploration of every fucking pleasure you can feel from that meal. And so finding a good balance is like, that's the life enjoyment balance, where if you eat enough maintenance meals, then you'll live longer to eat more mouthfeel meals. But it's finding the balance to actually be able to enjoy both, to live long enough to enjoy it. And I think that's where it's like, the system it never pushes balance, it never pushes moderation. And so anytime moderation or balance are brought in, then they're taken to extremes because that's all we're inundated with is extremes. And so I think that's why I have a hard time ever like blaming people for their problems with like food or like the way that like the the fundamental relationship that Americans have with food is damaged sometimes beyond repair. And I cannot blame any individuals from that because we're inundated with propaganda from the fucking time we're children, and they got like fucking sugar smacks trying to get us addicted to sugar and like get us hooked on that fucking that other cane early on, the CANE, get us hooked on that cane and make it seem like it's cool because they got a bunch of fucking colors and they got bears and they got fucking mascots and they got fluffy things to make it look okay. But it's really just trying to get a bunch of addicts like hopped up on that sugar. And then once that sugar's in the house, it never leaves. And so seeing the sugar inundation cycle, seeing how fucking obesity didn't used to be a problem ever in America, let alone like a childhood epidemic. And I definitely see a correlation with the fucking rise of sugary cereals, and not just the cereals, but the fucking commercials and the fucking toys in the box that are like manipulation and coercion of children that other countries have banned, and they've made these practices illegal. And then you find out that they had organizations and people who were like upset here and tried to like make it so that these things weren't the norm, but instead they're just like, oh no, we'll just put it on fucking public television. It's okay if it's everywhere else. It's okay if children can be inundated with propaganda about consumption everywhere else. As long as they have public television to not do that, then they'll be fine. Obviously, that's not true because sugar is a problem. Childhood obesity is a problem. Adult obesity is a problem. And consumption is a problem. So, like, knowing that the efforts to when commercial propaganda proliferation began, knowing that there was an effort to stop it in America, but that the effort effectively failed, allows me to give more grace to people who grow up in that system under the propaganda than if I didn't know how much they had to go against, I would blame more individuals for their inability to fathom their own individual diet. But even down to like, there was a eat right for your blood type thing that then people claim isn't accurate or doesn't have any validity, which it may not. Okay, I can acknowledge that everything doesn't have to have scientifically, statistically provable numbers for there to be something valuable there. Whereas if everyone who eats for their specific blood type doesn't see the same effects, that doesn't actually mean that there's no positive benefit. That just means that there's no statistically significant measurable effect. That doesn't mean there's no effect. And so that to me is that gap where the food industry has exploited people's inability to connect with nutritionists and their inability to connect with someone who can help them identify their own individual needs and their own individual demands versus like what they're being told they should eat every day as like a regular person. Especially when you take into account, like, obviously people are different sizes. So like, why would a person who's like 4'5" need the same amount of calories as somebody who's 6'5"? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Obviously. So
because they're barrel shaped.
Right. Yeah. They're like 4 feet 8 inches tall, but 6 feet 8 inches wide.
Yeah.
but it's like, with knowing that everybody, like, obviously people aren't the same size, the one size fits all diet, knowing that the size of the person that they're trying to make that diet for is not a small person. Like, why would they choose a man and make that the standard? Like, it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense knowing that half the population, like, we should have at least two recommended daily caloric intakes, one for the average male, one for the average female. If this was even remotely scientific. But that's how you know right there that there's something wrong. The fact that there's only one recommended daily intake for calories, that's a huge fucking red flag. And and that's where I'm like, now I've had enough time in my own body and in this society to see the effects of, like, the society and the effects of self-reflection. And society is not going to be able to give me the proper diet assessment that honest self-reflection does. But the issue becomes, when do you have time to do that self-reflection? And if society isn't willing to, like, give you that time, a lot of people aren't going to know to take the initiative to make that time. And that's something where it's like, some people are born with that, but that's a type of initiative that most people have to learn. Like, not to say that some people aren't, it's if you're born with it, it's a rebel spirit where you're, like, sometimes just rebelling without a cause, but then you eventually find something that is worth your time. Whereas somebody who's not taught to, like, take initiative is very well just gonna go with the flow and keep rolling, wherever the wind blows them, which is, again, nothing wrong with that. It's the path of least resistance. But that person is also not going to then find out the best diet for them, because we don't have free healthcare and we don't have access to nutritionists like that, just in general. So it's not going to be something you just stumble into. Like, the proper dietary needs and the proper, like, basal metabolic rate, it's not something that people are just
people go to school
into.
to study that stuff and they still get it wrong. That's the part that really gets me. There are people that actually go to school to, like, study how to do nutrition, and, like, they're not batting 100. They still have to dial it in. They still have to experiment to some degree, like, what works, what doesn't work, what has the best bioavailability for me. That stuff isn't, like, obvious either. I mean, it's not like Eastern medicine mysticism level stuff either, but it's not like paint by numbers where we can just say, oh yeah, I'm a 16 blue B1265, like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, and it shouldn't. We shouldn't be, like, diet by numbers and letter schema. That would be really weird. That's like Jetsons level food. everything, all your nutrients in a pill with a drug induced satisfaction that you just ate a hamburger or a steak. Man, like everyone who's complaining about like plant based meats, and or they're going to be in for a real sad state when those plant based meats aren't fully developed by the time that we need them, and everyone's consuming what amounts to a power bar with drugs to convince us that we just ate a hamburger or a steak. We could have had a plant based substitute for protein.
Well, and it sucks too, because like I was heavy into the plant-based stuff for a while, and then you find out it's like heavily loaded with fucking canola oil or like soy oil
or palm oil
or fucking palm oil, and you're like, dude, come on, man. I just traded one thing for another, and you're trying to make it seem like I'm doing an upgrade when in reality it's kind of a downgrade, because these oils are going to take longer than the fucking natural oils that are just found in the meat. Yeah. And it's like now we're back to,
or it's palm oil, which we don't process.
Right. Man. And this is the type of shit where now, like, we've been so good about checking our, products for the ingredients list. And to their credit, like a lot, I don't know if every grocery store is like this, but it feels like the grocery stores are offering more non-brand name foods that don't have ultra processed ingredients. And so like if you go to Meijer, and I remember Kroger had some decent shit too, where it's like if you get jelly, it'll be like the fruit and then sugar. And you're like, wait, isn't this all that's in it? That's right. This is what it's supposed to look like. And not like high fructose corn syrup and some fucking preservative and some dyes that you can't, like, it's like.
It might say animal pectin on it, but that's just to let the people who want a vegan diet to know that they can't have any of it. I'm talking about like jams or jellies, though.
Well, but even then, they have agar. I think it's agar.
Agar. Yeah. Isn't that bacteria?
Yes.
That's the stuff that you grow bacteria on.
Yes. And it's like the vegan
alternative to pectin.
Gumming agent.
Yeah. But it's also used to like bind meat together. Yeah. Where would we be without our industrial food products?
But I guess, okay, in learning, like, a lot of the industrial food practices came from wartime.
Yeah.
And they just never stopped doing it. It's like, I get we're in a goddamn military industrial country, but it's like, when do they when do they realize that they can't kill their citizens the way that they're doing, or they can't like fatten up Americans on accident with all this goddamn sugar and corn syrup and everything, and then expect Americans to actually be like competitive on a global scale in anything? And I feel like this is where a lot of the conspiracy theory comes from, in that this disconnected, disorganized industry that looks like there's some coordinated effort to poison, when in reality it's just like a bunch of individual businesses cutting corners, and like that's how your Lunchables end up with fucking heavy metals in them. It's like, it's not a government conspiracy to kill your kids. It's just the government not holding companies accountable for capitalist practices, and then capitalism actually doing capitalism. That's why your fucking kids have heavy metals in their foods. That's just capitalism. And so seeing it, that's where I'm like, this can't go on. This can't, like, we have to be close to the end. And it's only been like 50 years, 60 years.
Was it Wonder Bread that had heavy metals in it, or?
I mean, maybe too, but I was like, literally, Lunchables just got found with heavy metals in them.
Shit.
I wasn't making that up. Like kids' Lunchables. This was like
lead and cadmium.
Yeah,
I'm not
just being a fucking anti-capitalist hater. That's something that just happened. Let me see the act.
Yeah, it's a 2024 study. Consumer Reports Lunchables contain heavy metals. Surprise.
So just in general.
April 12th.
Yes. But that's just capitalism. So that's why I'm like, it feels like there's some conspiracy to like kill our children and kill us. But no, they're just cutting corners. How long can that go on? Because the issue is, I'm not gonna eat fucking lunch. You know, I'm not, my family's not gonna eat that shit. So if somebody
I'm gonna eat some sausage and crackers, it's gonna be like crackers that I select myself, and probably some like sausage that I've selected, and like cheese that I've selected, not like packaged for me and pre-sliced. I'm probably gonna have to cut these things myself, except for the crackers. Those should come in ready to eat portion sizes. There might actually be real mustard involved. It might not be crackers. It might be bread, in which case I will have to cut it myself. That's the kind of Lunchable that I think about. Actually, like that's like a charcuterie board, right? That's what Lunchables are trying to be.
Well, and then on the other end, you got the fucking Boar's Head high-end elite deli meats that got listeria now. So, yeah, so it's like
that's the stuff that like kills people like weeks after they're exposed to it.
Yeah,
right?
There's 3 people are dead from it.
Oh man. Yeah, that's totally the stuff that like gets you like well after you're exposed.
10 more hospitalized. So again, this is what I'm like.
3 weeks.
This is the end.
Wait,
this is what the end looks like.
Incubation period is anywhere from a few hours to 90 days, and symptoms appear within 3 weeks, and as long as 10. That's insane.
We're coming up on the Bell riots. We're about to have the Bell riots. Fucking, this feels like the end of capitalism. I've never in my life felt more confident that a TV show has manifested something that is close to reality, like the Deep Space Nine Bell riots, fucking Gavin Newsom out there removing homeless encampments. Oh, we're about to. This is the bottom before we start rising as a species again. Everybody's gonna realize this sucks. We shouldn't be putting lead in our fucking Lunchables. We shouldn't be having listeria in our fucking deli meats. We shouldn't be we shouldn't have any homeless people. They should all be in homes that the fucking state has built or has been repossessed from some failed capitalist endeavor. We shouldn't even have any homeless people. And we're very close to everybody realizing that like we have enough money and enough resources to end all this shit. We don't need any fucking, everything could be good.
I read about the concept of the maximum wage recently.
Yes. How it actually works.
Yeah, I think it
actually works.
Yeah,
because they've applied it in other countries.
Yeah,
we're close. We're very close.
Like the harsh reality that if somebody's making $1 million a month and they can't like live within those means, there's something extremely wrong. Like, there shouldn't be any billionaires. Like, there shouldn't be anybody making $12 million a year. That's like obscene.
And I feel, it's not even a feeling anymore. I know for a fact that we are closer than ever to everybody realizing how dumb that is and potentially doing something about it. So I think that's the issue. We have to know first, but then we can do something once everybody knows.
And that's where, it's on the horizon. If you can't make it on $1 million a month, there's something very wrong with that person. It's just
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.